know him and Hazel E are dating. What do you think of her, and do you approve of her, of the relationship?
I don't know yet. I need to probably sit down and have some dinner with her and see what she's talking about. She seems to be like a nice young lady, but...
Okay, so what do you think about the age gap between them? I know she's like 45.
Nobody saw this coming. Not the fans, not the blogs, not even the people who thought they'd already seen every possible form of family dysfunction on the internet. Because when Blueface finally opened his mouth, he didn't just spill tea. He knocked the entire table over, flipped the chairs, and walked out while the room was still screaming. This wasn't a casual complaint. This wasn't a petty rant. This was a full-blown exposure that made people stop scrolling and say, wait, what did he just say? According to Blueface, the problem isn't the industry. It isn't the fame. It isn't even the non-stop chaos that follows him like a bad Wi-Fi signal. The real issue has been sitting way closer to home. His own mother. And not in a we argue sometimes way. In a way that made fans uncomfortable, confused, and genuinely disturbed. The kind of situation where people stop laughing halfway through the clip and realize something isn't funny anymore. Social media froze for a second. Comment sections turned into group therapy sessions. And suddenly everyone was asking the same question at once. Is this over-exaggerated drama? Or did Blueface just expose something nobody was supposed to say out loud? Because what he described doesn't sound like normal family conflict. It sounds like something much darker. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Blueface has built an entire career off being unpredictable. The music, the interviews, the relationships, the social media meltdowns, chaos has always been part of the brand. So when whispers started floating around that he was about to expose something personal, most people assumed it was just another chapter in the ongoing circus. Another rant. Another viral moment that would burn bright for 48 hours and disappear. But this time, the chaos felt different. It didn't feel loud. It felt heavy. Instead of jumping straight into insults or theatrics, Blueface did something unexpected. He slowed down. He started talking about patterns, about things that had been happening for years that he brushed off, laughed at, or explained away because that's just family. And right there is where the tone shifted. Because whenever someone starts justifying behavior before even describing it, you already know the story is about to get uncomfortable. He described a relationship with his mother that went far beyond typical parental involvement. Not just advice, not just concern, but constant monitoring of his personal life, his finances, his relationships, his decisions. According to him, nothing was ever really his. Every move came with commentary. Every choice came with pushback. And every attempt at independence was met with resistance disguised as protection. At first, fans tried to rationalize it. He's famous. He's reckless. Of course, a mother would worry. But Blueface didn't describe worrying. He described control. The kind that doesn't knock before entering. The kind that feels entitled to every detail. The kind that doesn't respect boundaries because it doesn't believe boundaries should exist. And when he said it out loud, people realized how often they'd seen this dynamic play out in public without questioning it. He talked about how his relationships always seemed to turn into family affairs. How personal conflicts somehow became public debates the moment they didn't go a certain way. How it felt like his private life was never really private because someone was always ready to speak for him, correct him, or undermine him. And when he tried to push back, the reaction wasn't calm. It was explosive. That's when fans started rewatching old moments with new eyes. Interviews where his mom chimed in too aggressively. Live streams where she dominated the narrative. Social media posts that felt less like support and more like ownership. Back then, it was brushed off as that's just how she is. Now, it looked different. Now it looked invasive. Blueface hinted that the obsession wasn't just emotional, it was positional. As if she didn't just want to be his mother, but also his manager, his gatekeeper, and sometimes even his spokesperson. And that blurred line created tension that never really went away. Because when one person plays too many roles in your life, there's no room left to breathe. The most disturbing part wasn't even the behavior itself. It was the normalization of it. Blueface admitted he spent years convincing himself this was normal, that this was love. That questioning it made him ungrateful. And that's where the sarcasm practically writes itself. Because nothing says healthy family dynamic like feeling guilty for wanting basic autonomy as an adult when he finally started pulling away. Things escalated. Boundaries were suddenly seen as betrayal. Independence was treated like disrespect. And every disagreement seemed to morph into a public spectacle. Fans noticed how often his mom took to social media during moments of conflict, framing herself as the victim while subtly painting him as ungrateful or out of control. The narrative always felt tilted, and now it was starting to make sense why Blueface didn't need to accuse her of malicious intent. He let the discomfort do the talking. He described feeling like his life was never fully his, even after fame, money, and adulthood. Like he was still being watched, directed, and corrected from behind the scenes. And when he said the word obsession, it hit differently. Because obsession doesn't always look aggressive. Sometimes it looks like over-involvement dressed up as concern. The internet split instantly. Some people rushed to defend his mother, saying she sacrificed everything and deserved loyalty. Others pointed out that sacrifice doesn't entitle someone to control another person's life indefinitely. Love isn't ownership. Support isn't surveillance. And protection shouldn't feel like a cage. What made the situation even darker was how familiar it felt to so many people. Comment sections filled up with stories from fans who had lived similar experiences. Parents who couldn't let go. Parents who blurred emotional boundaries. Parents who treated their children's success as shared property. Suddenly, this wasn't just celebrity drama. It was a mirror. Blueface's tone throughout all of this was telling. He wasn't bragging. He wasn't chasing sympathy. He sounded drained. Like someone who had finally reached the point where silence was more painful than backlash. And when someone like him, someone who thrives in controversy, chooses vulnerability instead, you know the situation ran deeper than internet jokes. By the end of his explanation, one thing was clear. This wasn't a single argument blown out of proportion. This was years of tension finally spilling over. Years of blurred boundaries finally being named. And once you name something, you can't pretend it doesn't exist anymore. Fans were left sitting with an uncomfortable realization. Maybe the chaos surrounding Blueface wasn't just self-inflicted. Maybe it was nurtured, managed, encouraged in ways that benefited someone else staying close to the spotlight. And if that was true, then this story wasn't just disturbing. It was only getting started. Once Blueface's words hit the internet, the reaction wasn't just loud, it was feral. This wasn't a normal celebrity, he said, she said moment where fans pick sides and move on. This felt like someone had yanked open a door people didn't even realize was locked. And once that door opened, everybody leaned in at the same time. Blogs didn't even have to exaggerate. The comments were doing the heavy lifting. Social media turned into a full-blown courtroom overnight. TikTok stitched the clips. Twitter dissected every sentence. Instagram comment sections looked like group therapy mixed with a roast session. People weren't just reacting to what Blueface said. They were reacting to what they suddenly realized they had been watching for years without questioning. The memes came first, because humor is the internet's coping mechanism. People joked that his mom had more screen time than his music career. Others compared her involvement to a reality TV villain who refuses to be written out of the script. There were jokes about her acting like a manager, a publicist, and a jealous ex all rolled into one. It was funny. Until it wasn't, because behind the jokes was a creeping sense of discomfort. Reaction channels jumped in, each one trying to sound more shocked than the last. Some hosts tried to downplay it, calling it family drama blown out of proportion. That angle lasted about 5 minutes before the receipts started rolling in. Old live streams resurfaced where she dominated conversations that weren't hers. Interviews where she spoke over him like he wasn't even in the room. posts where she framed his personal struggles as her own battles. Suddenly, the concerned mom narrative started looking shaky. The tone shifted fast. Influencers who usually thrive on plotting started getting serious. They pointed out how often Blueface's romantic relationships became family conflicts instead of private matters. How arguments that should have stayed behind closed doors somehow turned into public statements. How control often hides behind words like protecting and guiding. And once that idea took root, the internet couldn't unsee it. Then came the comparisons. People said this situation made reality TV families look disciplined. Others joked that even soap operas would reject this storyline for being too messy. Someone said this felt less like a hip-hop drama and more like a psychological thriller where the villain insists they're the hero. Harsh, yes, viral. Absolutely. What really poured gasoline on the fire was Blueface's silence during the peak of the outrage. No clarifications. No backtracking. No, you misunderstood me. Just quiet. And silence on the internet is never neutral. Fans interpreted it as confirmation. As if he'd finally said what he needed to say and was letting the chaos speak for itself. Meanwhile, his mom didn't stay quiet. And that, right there, became the twist nobody needed but everyone expected. Her responses didn't calm anything down. They escalated it. Defensiveness replaced reassurance. Emotional language replaced accountability. And to a lot of viewers, it felt like she was proving his point in real time. People started saying the same thing over and over in different ways. If this is just love, why does it look so controlling? If this is support, why does it feel so invasive? If this is concern, why does it always center her feelings instead of his boundaries? Those questions echoed across platforms, and no one seemed satisfied with the answers. The outrage evolved into something bigger than celebrity gossip. It became a cultural conversation about toxic family dynamics, about parents who struggle to separate their identity from their children's success, about the thin line between involvement and obsession, about how fame amplifies unhealthy dynamics instead of fixing them. Even people who couldn't stand Blueface found themselves siding with him on this one. Not because he's perfect, but because the pattern was undeniable. You don't have to like someone to recognize when something around them feels off. And the more people looked back, the clearer it became that this dynamic had been hiding in plain sight. Sarcasm flooded timelines. Nothing says unconditional love like public humiliation, protective parenting, but make it a press tour when boundaries are treated like betrayal. Each joke landed because it carried a truth people recognized from their own lives. That's what made this situation explode. It wasn't just shocking. It was relatable in the worst way. Celebrities subtly weighed in without naming names. Cryptic tweets about narcissistic parenting. Stories about cutting cords. Quotes about control disguised as care. Nobody said Blueface's name, but everyone knew who the conversation was about. And that indirect commentary made it even louder. By the end of this phase, the narrative had completely shifted. This was no longer about whether Blueface was exaggerating. It was about whether people had been ignoring red flags because they were wrapped in humor and familiarity. The jokes didn't disappear, but they got sharper. The laughter turned an easy and right when the internet thought it had fully processed the situation. A new realization hit. If this dynamic had shaped Blueface's public chaos for years, then the fallout wasn't going to stop with viral clips and memes. Because when something this deeply rooted gets exposed, it doesn't just affect one relationship. It rewrites how everyone involved is seen. Once the noise settled just enough for people to actually think, the real damage started showing. Not the viral kind. The slow burn consequences that don't trend for a day but linger for years. Because when a family dynamic like this gets exposed in public, it doesn't snap back to normal. It fractures. And everyone involved feels it, whether they admit it or not. For Blueface, the shift was immediate. Fans didn't look at him the same way anymore. Not as a walking punchline, not as just another self-sabotaging rapper addicted to chaos. Suddenly, people started asking whether the chaos had been cultivated, whether the instability wasn't just personal failure, but something learned, reinforced, and quietly encouraged. And that question alone rewrote his entire public narrative. Sympathy crept in where ridicule used to live. Not universal support, but understanding. The kind that makes people pause before laughing. The kind that turns memes into think pieces. People started saying things like, "This explains a lot," and "No wonder he moves the way he does." And once that door opened, it couldn't be shut again. But understanding comes with a price. Because when the public starts reframing your story, they also start reevaluating everyone connected to it. And that's where the spotlight got uncomfortable. His mom wasn't just being criticized for what she said or did in the moment. She was being reinterpreted through years of behavior. Every past appearance, every comment, every intervention suddenly carried new weight. What once looked like fierce protection now looked like emotional overreach. What once felt like loyalty now read as entitlement. And what was once dismissed as just her personality started to feel like a pattern that couldn't be ignored anymore. The internet didn't need accusations. It needed context. And now it had plenty. The most uncomfortable consequence was the loss of credibility. Once people start questioning motives, it's almost impossible to get that trust back. Even neutral statements began to feel calculated. Every attempt to explain sounded like justification. Every emotional appeal felt self-centered. And whether that perception was fair or not didn't even matter anymore. The narrative had shifted, and narratives don't ask permission. Meanwhile, Blueface faced a different kind of reckoning. Because exposing something this personal doesn't free you instantly, it complicates everything. Family relationships don't reset because the internet agrees with you. If anything, the pressure multiplies. Boundaries get harder to enforce when millions of strangers are watching. And healing doesn't happen on a timeline that fits a content cycle. The industry watched closely too. Because this wasn't just a personal issue. It was a cautionary tale about what happens when family becomes business. When support systems turn into control systems. When fame amplifies dysfunction instead of fixing it. Managers whispered. Labels took notes. Because no one wants to inherit a mess this personal and this public. The internet, of course, never fully lets go. Even as new scandals popped up, this one stayed in rotation. People referenced it whenever Blueface made a move. Every decision was filtered through the lens of his exposure. Every public appearance came with comments asking whether he was finally free or still trapped in the same cycle. What made this fallout especially brutal was how quiet it became. No dramatic resolution. No emotional reconciliation. No public apology tour. Just distance. And distance in family drama is louder than any argument. Silence becomes the message. Absence becomes the boundary. And for a lot of viewers, that felt more telling than any rant ever could. There was also a ripple effect beyond the main players. Other celebrities started getting side-eyed for similar dynamics. Overbearing parents. Family members living off proximity to fame. People began asking questions they hadn't asked before. Who really benefits from this chaos? Who gains visibility from dysfunction? And who pays the emotional price behind the scenes? Blueface didn't come out looking like a hero. He came out looking human, flawed, damaged, but finally honest. And in a culture that thrives on pretending everything is fine, that honesty hit harder than perfection ever could. It forced people to confront how often toxic dynamics get excused when they're wrapped in family labels. The most disturbing realization wasn't about obsession itself. It was about how easily obsession can hide behind love, how control can masquerade as concern, how manipulation can sound like sacrifice, and how long people will tolerate it if it comes from someone who's just trying to help. As the dust settled, one thing became painfully clear. This story wasn't over. Not because of more drama, but because the questions it raised don't disappear. They follow. They resurface. They sit in the background every time Blueface steps into the spotlight. And that's the real cliffhanger. Now listen, if you made it this far, don't pretend you weren't hooked. You didn't just watch a story, you survived it. And if this situation didn't make you uncomfortable, confused, or at least slightly concerned, congratulations! Your tolerance for chaos is Olympic level. Because this wasn't just messy. This was the kind of mess that sticks to your shoes and follows you home. So let's do the obvious thing. Smash that like button like it owes you money and keeps dodging your calls. Don't tap it gently. Don't think about it. Hit it with the same energy Blueface dropped this bombshell. Because likes tell the algorithm, yeah, this one was different. Now jump into the comments, because I already know they're about to be wild. Was Blueface exaggerating? Or did he finally say the quiet part out loud? Is this obsession masked as love? Or just another chapter in celebrity family chaos? Say what everyone else is scared to tape. This is a judgment-free zone. Mostly. And if you're still watching without subscribing, that's suspicious behavior. Hit subscribe like it's a boundary you're finally enforcing. Because if you think this is the last disturbing scandal we're covering, you must be new here. This channel drops chaos the way the internet drops common sense. Constantly. Turn on notifications too, because scandals don't send calendar invites. 1 minute everything's quiet, the next minute someone's exposing family secrets like it's a clearance sale. And when that happens, you don't want to hear about it late. Remember, fame doesn't heal dysfunction. It just puts better lighting on it. And if this story taught us anything, it's that the mess behind the scenes is always bigger than what we see on camera. So stay locked in, stay curious, and stay ready. Because the next scandal is already loading. This is Celeb Sync, where the truth hits harder, the drama runs deeper, and nothing stays hidden for long.